They pulled 27 bodies from the Niger River that morning. Women, traders, mothers. But Adaeze Okonkwo's body was never found. And what the river gave back 3 days later would shake an entire community to its core. She walked out of the water at dawn, her wrapper dry, her eyes seeing things no living person should see. And in her hands, she carried something that would reveal a truth more powerful than any myth. This is her story. This is what really happened the night the river took her. November 28th, 2024. The sun had barely touched the horizon when 200 passengers crowded onto a wooden boat at the banks of the Niger River in Kogi State. Among them was Adaeze Okonkwo, 32 years old, a cassava trader from a small village called Ejul. She had 3 children waiting at home, a husband who worked the farms, and a dream that one day her business would lift them out of poverty. That morning, like every Thursday morning for the past 6 years, Adaeze made the journey across the Niger River to the Kacha market in Niger State. The boat was supposed to carry 100 people, but in communities where poverty runs deeper than the river itself, people don't have the luxury of waiting for the next boat. They squeeze in. They pray. They hope the water will be merciful. Adaeze sat near the middle of the vessel, her cloth bag pressed against her chest. Inside it, everything she had earned from the previous week. 12,000 naira. In American dollars, that's barely $8. But for Adaeze, it was school fees for her eldest daughter. It was medicine for her mother. It was survival. The boat pushed off from ashore. The river was calm. The morning air smelled of rain and wood smoke. And for the first 15 minutes, everything seemed normal. Then the boat lurched. A sudden violent shift that sent passengers stumbling into each other. Someone screamed. The vessel had struck something beneath the water, an old submerged log, river debris carried down from the north. The impact split the hull. Water poured in like the river had been waiting for this moment. Chaos erupted. People scrambled, reaching for anything that might float. Mothers clutched their children. Men tried to swim toward the shore. But the Niger River does not negotiate. It takes. And that morning, it took without mercy. Adaeze felt the cold water swallow her legs first, then her waist, then her chest. She tried to hold onto the side of the boat, but her fingers slipped. The current pulled her under. In those final seconds before the river claimed her, she thought of her children. She thought of her daughter Chinanai, who had just learned to braid her own hair. She thought of her son Obinna, who still believed his mother was the strongest woman in the world. She thought of her baby Kamsi, who cried every time she left for market. And then the water filled her lungs. And everything went dark. Before we continue deeper into Adaeze's story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. By the time rescue workers arrived at the scene, most of the passengers had either drowned or were missing. Local divers plunged into the murky waters searching for survivors, for bodies, for anything. They found 27 bodies that day. They would find more in the days to come. But Adaeze Okonkwo was not among them. The river had swallowed her completely. Her husband, Chikwudi, stood at the riverbank for 3 days. He barely slept. He barely ate. He just stood there, staring at the water, waiting for his wife to come back to him. On the 3rd day, some of the villagers tried to pull him away. They told him it was time to accept what the river had done. They told him to go home to his children. They told him Adaeze was gone. But Chikwudi refused to leave. And that's when he saw her. It was early morning. The mist still clung to the water's surface. And through that mist, a figure emerged. Walking, not swimming. Walking out of the Niger River as if she were stepping out of her own home. Her wrapper was dry. Her hair was untouched. And her eyes held a strange, distant light, like she had seen beyond the veil of this world. Adaeze Okonkwo had returned. But she was not the same woman who had gone into that river 3 days before. Chikwudi ran to her. He fell to his knees. He wept. He touched her face to make sure she was real. She smiled at him, a sad, gentle smile, and she said something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. She said the mermaid had taken her. She said Mami Wata had pulled her beneath the surface, down into a world of silence and light. And there, in the belly of the river, she had seen the truth. Now, Many of you watching this might be thinking, this is just folklore. This is myth. This is superstition. But in the riverine communities of Nigeria, Mami Wata is more than a story told to children. She is a spiritual force that has existed for centuries. A water deity who appears as a beautiful woman, sometimes with the tail of a fish, sometimes wrapped in serpents, always glowing with an otherworldly beauty. She is both generous and vengeful. She can grant wealth, fertility, and power to those who honor her. But she can also take everything away from those who disrespect the water. And for generations, people who have survived drownings, people who have been pulled from the river against all odds, have spoken of seeing her. They speak of being taken to a place beneath the water where time does not exist, where the living and the dead walk side by side, where secrets are revealed and destinies are altered. Most dismiss these stories, but Adaeze Okonkwo's survival was not something that could be easily dismissed. The doctors who examined her found no water in her lungs, no signs of hypothermia, no injuries. Her body showed no evidence of having been submerged for 3 days. It was as if she had simply held her breath and walked out. The villagers whispered. Some said she had been chosen. Others said she had made a pact. A few elders warned that Mami Wata does not return people without a reason. And they were right, because what Adaeze brought back from the river was not a blessing. It was a warning. She began to speak of things she should not have known. She described the faces of people who had drowned decades ago. She named children who had been lost to the river before she was even born. She spoke of futures that had not yet come to pass. And then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Adaeze gathered the women of her village. She sat them down beneath the iroko tree where they always met to shell melon seeds and share stories. And she told them what Mami Wata had shown her beneath the water. She said the river was angry, not because of the boat accident, not because of the deaths. The river was angry because for years, the people had ignored the warnings. They had overloaded boats to save money. They had skipped safety measures to save time. They had treated the water as if it owed them safe passage. They had forgotten that the river gives life, but it also commands respect. Adaeze said Mami Wata had shown her the faces of all the women who would die in the coming years if nothing changed. She saw mothers drowning. She saw children being swept away. She saw entire families erased because people were too desperate, too poor, too ignored by those in power to demand better. And the water spirit had given her a message. The deaths would continue until the people remembered that their lives had value, until they stopped accepting broken boats and overloaded vessels as normal, until they stood up and said enough. At first, the women listened in silence. Some wept, others stared at the ground. But then one woman stood. Her name was Ngozi. She had lost her sister in a boat accident 2 years before. She said she was tired of crying, tired of burying people, tired of watching the same tragedy repeat itself because no one with power cared enough to stop it. Another woman stood, then another, and another, and within days, the women of Ejul and the surrounding villages began to organize. They went to the local government offices in Kogi State. They demanded life jackets. They demanded boat inspections. They demanded accountability. At first, the officials dismissed them. These were just village women, poor women, women with no political power. But the women did not back down. They blocked the roads. They refused to let boats operate without safety measures. They made so much noise that journalists started to pay attention. And slowly, painfully, things began to change. 6 months after Adaeze walked out of the Niger River, the Kogi State government announced new regulations for water transport. Boats would be inspected. Capacity limits would be enforced. Life jackets would be mandatory. It was not perfect. It was not enough. But it was a start. And it happened because one woman came back from the dead with a message. Because she refused to let her survival mean nothing. Because she turned her trauma into a weapon for change. Adaeze Okonkwo never spoke much about what she saw beneath the water. She never described the face of Mami Wata or the world she had been taken to. Some things, she said, were not meant to be spoken aloud. But she did say this. She said the mermaid had not taken her to punish her. The mermaid had taken her to save her, not just from drowning, but from a lifetime of accepting that her life and the lives of the women around her were worth less than convenience, less than profit, less than the cost of a life jacket. 2 years later, Adaeze still makes the journey to catch a market every Thursday. But now, she travels on a boat that has been inspected, a boat that carries life jackets, a boat that does not exceed its capacity. Her daughter Chinanai is in secondary school now. Her son Obina wants to be a doctor, and baby Kamsi, who once cried every time her mother left, now waves goodbye with a smile because she knows her mother will come home. And sometimes, on quiet mornings when the mist still clings to the river, Adaeze stands at the water's edge. She whispers a thank you to the spirit that pulled her under and pushed her back, because she understands now what the elders always knew. The river does not just take. Sometimes, when the time is right, when the person is ready, the river gives back. And what it gives back is not just a life. It's a purpose. So let me ask you this. If you were in Adaeze's place, if you had been pulled beneath the water and shown the suffering of your people, would you have had the courage to speak? Would you have stood up and demanded change, even when the world told you to be quiet? Or would you have walked away, grateful just to be alive, and let the river keep taking? Think about that. Because the truth is, we all stand at the edge of rivers in our own lives. Rivers of injustice, rivers of indifference, rivers that take and take and take until someone finally says enough. Adaeze Okonkwo was just a cassava trader from a small village. She had no wealth, no title, no power, but she had something more valuable than all of that. She had a story that refused to be silent. And in the end, that story saved lives. They say the mermaid took her, but the truth is more complicated than that. The mermaid didn't take her. The mermaid woke her, and that awakening changed everything. This is the story of Adaeze Okonkwo, the woman who drowned, the woman who came back, the woman who turned a tragedy into a revolution. And if you think this story is unbelievable, if you think it's too strange to be true, then ask yourself this. How many women have to drown before we start believing their voices matter? How many lives have to be lost before we demand better? Because the real miracle of this story is not that Adaeze survived. The real miracle is that she made her survival count for something. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, if it made you think, if it made you feel something, leave a comment below and tell us what you would have done in her place. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, not every loss is the end. Sometimes it's the beginning of something greater. Subscribe for more timeless stories that will touch your heart and keep you thinking long after the video ends. And if you think this story was powerful, wait until you hear what happened in our next folktale. The river has more secrets to tell.